Deprofessionalization is a very interesting term that has begun to pop up in games development circles. This is an article here from Game Developer writing about PAX East, and what feels like fewer and fewer larger companies are going to these events, and in general, the fact that the games industry is becoming less and less of a corporate setting and more the domain of individual developers and small teams of 2 to 3 people. And this is a good thing. Oh my god, this is a good thing. This is the best thing that could ever happen to games. Yes, nature is healing. Strangle the life out of the corporations, every last single soulless one of them, and replace all of them with small developers who just want to make a goddamn video game. This, ironically, is actually a return to the 2000s state of existence. Now, not quite, of course, since that was still a fair bit into the development of the company's side in video games, but you get my general drift. It is the replacement of the corporate stooge who views video game creation as simply a 9-to-5 job with the people who actually wish to create entertainment, who have largely been pressed out by the corporate stooges. Okay. So, we're not going to read through the entirety of this article because it's fairly long and really dense. But the gist of it is, in essence, that our author here is lamenting the deprofessionalization of the games development industry, and how in particular this is hitting games narrative writers, for example, those who come in afterwards and touch up stories and make them more diverse and so on, and the artists who habitually draw the most unattractive females you could ever possibly imagine. Those people, the people who are actively dragging down companies, they are the first to be let go in favor of games like Repo, for example, or the Schedule 1 game. Games made by people who just go like, oh, I have a crazy idea, let's see if it sells. And it does, and outsells even than the major AAA companies, who have long since lost any actual drive or interest in making video games. And here's the thing too. A great deal of the reason for the loss of that drive is simply that these businesses have become popular. You can look at Creative Assembly as an excellent example of this. Creative Assembly started out as a fairly small team going, God, wouldn't it be awesome if we could have massive battles in real-time strategy games? And everyone's like, that's impossible. You'd have to build a completely different engine for it. And they did with Shogun 1, which was, of course, an absolute revolution at the time. But then, with success, the studio ballooned and ballooned and ballooned and ballooned until at its highest ebb, it was employing 800 people and were producing games that were objectively less complex in nearly every way than its predecessors. Their games continued to get simpler and worse, with the only things improving being, generally speaking, graphics, although that even is debatable in some cases, and a user-friendliness, which, that's one thing I will say, the user-friendliness of Total War games has absolutely increased, but you would think when you're employing something like 8 times the number of people that quality would increase as well, but it doesn't. How could that be the case? Well, simply because one person will be working at one of these companies and go like, oh my god, we're doing gangbusters. We've got great benefits, we've got great pay, this is awesome. And other people are like, wow, video games are awesome, that's a rising industry. I'm going to take a developmental job in there. And they go, oh, hey, Jerry, you got to come work here. And Bob, you've got to come work here. And you begin creating positions, makeshift work. You're adding more chefs into the kitchen without clearly the ability to organize all of them. Then, of course, you have the developers themselves, like the head honcho, the leadership positions, which was the case with Rome 2, for example, that don't understand how to organize several hundred people. They did just fine when they had a small team, but now that they've got entire divisions to order around, they lose track and they become incapable of organizing everything properly. That, incidentally, is supposedly the reason why Rome 2 Total War's AI was so terrible, because they kept changing it all the time and nobody had a clear overview of what exactly was happening or when certain pieces of the puzzle needed to be slotted into place so as to create a complete video game. Simply throwing more people at something does not, as is blatantly self-evident, create a better product. Especially today, where you have the ability to take small people with pre-made tools and create entire video games with relative ease in comparison to the olden days. And of course, then there's the question of cost. As we just saw with Doom: The Dark Ages, for example, you have a game in a successful series with good marketing, good hype behind it, all kinds of neat trailers and ideas with flying heavy metal dragons and killing demons, and it just didn't sell. What could be the reason for that? Well, Oblivion came out just before it, Expedition 33 as well, massively successful titles that definitely sucked a lot of the wind out of the sails, but the $70 price tag is probably the biggest killer, along of course with the availability of Game Pass for the title. Why would you buy a $70 video game that you could get for $15 for a month? You're not going to be playing it beyond that month, and if you're going to be picking it up in the future for the same single-player experience, you'll get it on sale for 70% off on Steam. This pricing structure simply isn't maintainable anymore in a market overflowing with good games. And again, the problem there is of course the catch-22. You can't ask $70 for a video game in the current market when there are so many other opportunities to either get it for virtually nothing on Game Pass or on a sale 6 months to a year later, and at the same time you have to ask more and more for video games because your company is ballooning madly, with the marketing divisions, with 100 artists, with 100 programmers, half of which are just getting in each other's way, etc, etc. And to bring up the example of Twitter for the umpteenth time, Elon Musk bought it, fired hundreds of people, a stripped down crew, and whilst there was some downtime, some problems here and there, Twitter is running fine. It didn't collapse, it wasn't a catastrophic explosion, which tells us very, very clearly that a lot of people who were working there, they didn't really have work to do. They had a job at the company, which they showed up every morning, collected their paycheck, and left. And for the rest of the time, they were playing Peggle on their phones. Not to mention the sheer number of adult daycare videos we've seen on YouTube, on Twitter, on TikTok, of people showing up to work at major corporations doing nothing, whilst not only collecting a paycheck, but stopping at the entrance of the company, getting themselves some fresh cucumber water, going to the buffet, going to the meditation room, etc. These companies grew so large far too quickly and lost all oversight over where the money was going. And of course then ESG and DEI funding came in as well, which guaranteed them a basic income regardless of sales, to the point where for quite a few years there, which is an era we are finally luckily reaching the end of now, a game didn't have to sell, it just had to tick the correct boxes for the funding benefits, and the money would sail into your accounts, to the point that for many companies it was objectively more profitable to make a game for the EU investor than for the player. That era is over. There are more games than ever, the competition is stiffer than ever, and so all of the dead meat that exists by their thousands, draining countless companies dry of money, must be fired. What will happen to them then after? Well, the standouts amongst them will go, Okay, I don't have a job at Ubisoft anymore, but I still have a passion for games. I'm gonna make my Assassin's Creed. Fantastic. I'm gonna make my Black Flag. I mean, I think they mentioned here a horror farming simulator, which immediately I'm like, I'm interested. That sounds cool. That's a completely off-the-wall idea I've never heard before. And the people who went into the industry simply because it was another tech industry that they assumed they could suck dry and collect a paycheck for 10 years whilst doing nothing, well, those people will either die or they'll move on to the next grift to suck another industry dry. Either way, we lose nothing and gain everything. So, banzai for the deprofessionalization of the video game industry, and banzai to the independent developer. It's a harsh and thorny road, and most of them will fail, mind you, as well. But for those few glorious standouts paving the way to success for everybody else, I salute you. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.